think? Let's give it up for the storytellers. And maybe it has something to do with the hard living of real work that has really brought out some excellent stories tonight. It's just amazing. So we have some other 1-minute stories. The judges are judging, and we also have Chris and friend Debbie and Robert's got a 1-minute story, and Dan Dahari's got 1-minute stories. So I could say we have like a 1-minute story festival while we let the judges do their judging, because they have a very hard job to do.
Okay, I'm an electrician. I've been working construction for many, many years. And the customers that I deal with, I do a lot of residential wiring, can be very difficult. I find people who don't want me to wear my shoes into their house difficult, as if there's something wrong with my feet that isn't wrong with theirs. And other people will not let you use their bathroom. On very hot days, people don't offer you water. You're slaving away in their attic, and they just sort of ignore you. And I find that the more money people make in their life, the less they are cognizant of what you need to be a human being. The worst case I ever came across was we were doing this house. People were very picky. They had a porta toilet in the driveway, 4 bathrooms in the house. We were working on doing one of them. They wouldn't let us use any of the other 3. And so couldn't go into the house with shoes on. But they asked me to take a look at a problem in the dining room. So I went in the dining room, and I was looking at this light that wasn't working. And I looked down at the dining room table, and there were these yellow stains around this very ugly table that had these metal legs. And I thought, God, what's this all about? Then I saw their little poodle, who they treated like a child, come in and urinate on the leg of the table. And I thought, these people deserve this. They wouldn't let me urinate in their bathroom, but their dog can piss on the leg of their table. So,
well, my parents had the driveway repaved. Repaving wasn't the entire job. They also wanted to have it widened a little bit near the house so 2 cars could park side by side, but the contractor didn't quite get it until they asked him to do it better after the driveway had been repaved, so the result was not very aesthetically pleasing. The contractor came up to the front door. I was standing behind my mother, and the contractor, my mother said, you know, that isn't good out there on the driveway. It looks like a patch job. And the contractor said to my mother, well, you know, you weren't real clear about it ahead of time, and if your husband didn't try to Jew me down on the price. My mother raised herself to her full 5 feet 4 inches. And she said, that's a patch job. We were very clear we wanted to put 2 cars side by side. And don't use that expression with me, it's insulting. How would you like it if I said you did an Italian job on the driveway? Now, I was raised in Newton, heavy Jewish population, and I was sitting there saying, did I hear what I thought I heard? And go, Mom! Thank you.
I have a 20-second follow-up. There's a contractor that has been following my project. He's a carpenter. And he was working on a job, and a woman and her children came into the home when the carpenters were working. And the woman said to her children, are you doing your homework? And the child said, we'll get to it later. He said, you need to do your homework. Someday you might end up being a carpenter. In front of the guys that were doing the work in their home. You don't want to end up becoming a carpenter like these guys. Ooh is right.
You would clap.
In college, I was a janitor. And I was a janitor at an accountant and lawyer buildings. And I used to go in and just do it as fast as I can. And I really didn't like the job, but I made a ton of money. And I would turn the vacuum on, and I would just pick up like a few white pieces and just let them hear the vacuum like I vacuumed. But I did a lot of things. I splashed pine sol around. But the one thing I had to do was clean out the urinal. And these guys would throw their cigarette butts into the urinal. And it pissed me off. Because I'd put on these rubber gloves, and I'd have to get the butt out of the urinal. So I decided, that's it. I cannot take this anymore. So I looked at the brand on the butt. And then I asked everyone who smokes, Pall Malls or whatever they were. And they told me this guy over here smokes them. So no problem. I saved all these wet, urinated cigarette butts.
Nice.
Put them on a piece of paper, left a note on his desk, and said, I will continue to leave these here as long as you continue to leave them in the urinal.
Nice.
Whoa.
So, we made so little money that I would walk places if it was only a mile away because subway fare was 20 cents in those years. It was the late 60s, but I wanted to save the 20 cents as often as possible, so I would walk and I would walk and I would walk, and most of the time I would enjoy it, but this day it was hot and it was sunny and it was sweaty, and by the end of the day I was completely exhausted. So I got out of the last place, the last package I delivered, and I was standing around a street corner in Midtown, and this bum comes up to me and asks for spare change. And I say, normally I love you guys, I always give you money, but I work so hard for money for the first time in my entire life that I just don't think I can give you any money. And he looked at me and said, you know, I know exactly what you mean. That's why I don't work.
No, I've never done this before. I guess some of the other things that people were talking about reminded me of this. Yes, inspiration. And I guess what I'd like to do is turn the tables a little bit, I was thinking, and challenge people to think of a title for this story. My Uncle Matt, who may rest in peace, was a tropical soils expert, and he worked all over the world. And he was stationed in Vietnam before America got into the war. So the French were there, and Henry Cabot Lodge was there, and my Uncle Matt had a lot of horrible things to say about everybody. But his men on his team used to go out into basically the front lines and do their tropical soil stuff, and they probably worked for the CIA, but we didn't talk about that. And one of his men got kidnapped and held for ransom. So they get the ransom note, and my Uncle Matt was about 5'2", with this huge grin, this incredibly friendly person that you couldn't help but like him and sort of trust him. Anyway, I have to finish this. That's a good one. So they put together a team, they got the money sent to them, and they went out into the jungle to ransom back this man. And so they get the money, they give the man, and my Uncle Matt, being, somewhat of a good bureaucrat at that point, said, I need a receipt so that I can prove. He said, I must have a receipt for my government to prove that all the money that they sent me was given to you for this man. So they thought, well, fair enough, okay. So they wrote out a receipt, they take the receipt, he takes the receipt home, takes the guy back, throws the receipt in a drawer and tells the story, and that was all very funny, except a year later, the same man was out in the jungle again and was captured again by the same group of people and held for ransom. And my uncle suddenly remembered the note the receipt in his desk drawer. So he went with his group, they go back, he asks for no money, he takes the receipt and he says, I already paid for him once, so you need to just hand him over. And they said, fair enough, and they did.
I manage a restaurant in Cambridge, and one day this guy comes in, runs into the store, he's like, who's the boss? And I was like, Tony Danza. And he was like, no. And I said, I guess that's me. He's like, I need to talk to whoever's in charge. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And he goes, he's holding a backpack, and he's like, open this up. And I was like, what's in it? And he goes, just open it up. And I go, what's in it? And he goes, just open it up. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to open it up unless you tell me what's in it. And he was like, all right, fine, I'm going to open it up. I was like, all right. And so he opens up this bag, and then he goes, what do you need? And then he just starts pulling out meat. And he just starts pulling out different cuts of meat, like from Shaw's. And that he just like has a backpack full of chicken cutlets and like pork chops and ground chuck. And I'm like, I'm not buying your backpack meat. And he's like, and he looks at me like dead in the face, and he goes, I was born and raised in Somerville all of my life, and I was like, and I'm gonna buy backpack meat now. And so he goes, you could give a man a break. And then he just like throws all his meat back into his bag and takes off.
In high school, I worked in a delicatessen in Brookline. I was supposed to be washing dishes, but they occasionally put me on the counter. So I'm up at the counter. Guy orders a cup of coffee. I give him the coffee. He comes back 2 minutes later. This coffee is cold. Would you heat it up? So I throw it out. I get a new pot fresh pot off the burner. I give it to him. It's as hot as the coffee gets. Comes back 2 minutes later. It's still too cold. So, okay, go back to your seat, have your meal. I'll be right with you. So I take the coffee. I put it in the pot. I put it on the burner. I turn the burner up full. I bring it to a boil as quickly as I can. I put it in the cup. I'm holding it with my apron. I bring it over to the guys, put it in front of him. I start walking away, and I look at him, and he takes a sip of it. He spits it back into the cup, turns around to me. I'm thinking, oh no. He goes,